The Habs have a perfect opportunity as for the first time in a long time, Hughes and Gorton have put them in a position to be under the cap without putting Price on LTIR to start the season. This has huge implications for the Habs. Plus, we got to talk about an important update on how Demidov could come over to North America. And finally, the betting odds are in favor as having Lane Hutson as one of the top Calder candidates for this season. We're going to get into a bunch of exciting stuff on this episode of Habs Digest, and we're going to start right away with Lane Hutson. Jesse, I think this could actually happen. Is it likely? No, and I think the odds books kind of reflect that. But Lane Hutson is going to be on the short list for a lot of people on who could win the Calder. At least I think in pretty much everyone's top 10 based on the showing that we saw last season. And while we are not betting men, as we've said many times on this show, we got to acknowledge that the books, well, they have Hutson near the top there. The best odds you can get is from DraftKings, but we don't care about the best odds. What I do want to say is that Hutson is 6th on most of the big betting odds places. And again, Jesse, they're kind of tuned in. They're reflecting what a lot of people are voting. The only people that are consistently above Hutson, Michkov, Celebrini, Gauthier, Stankoven, and Will Smith. And he's tied with Dustin Wolf and DraftKings. But other than that, you can see plus 700, plus 800. Jesse, he's right there. He's top 6. I think this is a real thing that could happen. Again, it hinges on him playing a lot of games and getting a lot of points, but I think crazier things have happened, and he has the pedigree to do this.
You know, at Habs Digest, we got the Lane Hutson propaganda ready to go. You know, the hockey world is just buzzing about Lane right now, and rightfully so. Ladies and gentlemen, get on that bandwagon early, right? Because this is a player for me, like, if he can score around that 50 points mark, which the caveat is that would be absolutely unreal in his first season in the NHL. For sure, he needs to get that ice time, a solid amount of ice time. Probably needs that time on the PP. But I'm here to say today, Josh, that Lane Hutson's not only going to be on the PP, but he's going to be the quarterback of our power play by the end of this very season, right? Marty's going to see something there, and his eyes are just going to light up, right? That's a Marty type of player. You tell that player about size, he's not going to carry anything. He's going to give plenty of ice time to Lane Hutson. Just watch, right? We know about Lane scoring those 50 points, right? He was able to get 49 points in 38 college games. True. Now, we know it's a different game from the NCAA and the NHL for sure, but 82 games. He's got a lot more runway to get there, right? And we're looking at, past winners like Sider, like Makar. If you're able to get around that 50-point mark, there is a solid chance. So this is my reason why, right? And we know, historically speaking, couple factors like Lane Hutson, he's been an underdog his whole life. So if he feels like he's in that striking range, that's good enough, right? He's got a plan to kind of take it that rest of the way there, right? So you really have to feel like he's capable of really doing this. So it's going to be amazing to see what happens next year.
I just want to see him finish top 5, if not top 3, because I think it's possible. Now, it also hinges on whether he'll actually start the season in Montreal, and I'm seeing even NHL.com's most recent projections, Jesse, don't even have him on the NHL roster, so that is one thing that is yet to be seen. But first of all, we trust Kent Hughes, Marty, everyone in the Habs organization to do what's best for Hutson and his development. But if he ends up playing with Montreal, I can see a world where it happens. I don't necessarily think it's that likely. I don't know if I'd put him 6th, but who knows? Again, unless you have it, last year, my boy Brock Faber, probably should have won it, except Bedard exists, so he's not going to get it. But if none of these guys have a Bedard-esque season, if none of these guys put up 75, 80 points, that door is kind of open. You never know how these guys are going to fare in their first year in the NHL, so it's going to be fun to track nonetheless. Let us know if you think Lane Hutson could finish top 5 in Calder voting down below. I think we're going to see a lot of yeses, but probably a lot of no's, people who think he might just play a bit too much in the AHL. But Jesse, speaking of other Habs prospects, we got to have an important clarification piece on Ivan Demidov. Now, we've been talking, a lot of people have been talking recently about how the Habs could bring him over to North America and how Kent Hughes could be out there, walking into St. Petersburg saying, I'm going to pay the transfer fee. Clarification point, he cannot do that. As Simon Semberg, a guy who is very much affiliated with European hockey clubs, I believe a writer and reporter over there, well respected from what I understand, he said, of note, any speculation that the Canadiens would enter negotiations with the Russian club to get Demidov for a transfer fee are baseless. It's not permitted under the CBA, and it was not done in the Flyers-Michkov case. And as Marc-Olivier Baudouin points out, there's an important note. The Habs can't negotiate with SKA to pay the transfer fee to bring Demidov to North America. That's not allowed by the CBA. It's Demidov and his agent who need to discuss with the team to buy out his contract. So there's a bit of nuance to it. So just wanted to clarify that point, Jesse. This still means there's a path for him to come over to North America. I think this is kind of just semantics in the sense that it's not Kent Hughes discussing directly with the Russian club. It would have to be Demidov probably discussing with Hughes about, hey, if we do this, will we have a spot? If they say yes, then they can go into negotiations. A bit of semantics, but I think a very important clarifying point nonetheless.
And it can still happen, folks. This is what's really important to kind of take away from here, right? Is like, we still see like tampering every day, every year in the NHL when it comes to CBA in terms of player signings on July 1st, right? There's supposed to be no kind of contract talks beforehand, but we know that this happens. So even if this means like Kent Hughes taking more of kind of a background sort of role, that's where Kent operates, right? Kind of pulling the strings there. So if there's one thing that Kent is really good at, even if he maybe needs to kind of take a little bit more of a back seat, so to speak here, is that like he knows contracts as being a former player agent, one of the best in the game, having a huge agency running this on top of that, right? Like he knows how to make these things happen. I have full confidence in Kent Hughes' ability to make this happen, to get Ivan Demidov here to North America, even as early as this year. If Kent Hughes feels this is the right thing for Ivan Demidov, I believe he will do it.
Yeah, I think so too, and I think it's still a very real possibility. And the thing is too, now it hinges a lot on whether Demidov is willing to do it himself. And by all accounts, from everything we've heard, it sure seems like this is something that a lot of insiders are saying, yeah, it could happen if Demidov doesn't make the KHL squad. So Demidov, I'm sure, is eager to get over here. I'm seeing some people being very speculative about whether he should even play in the NHL right away, but here's what I say. Give him the 9 games, let him prove himself if he comes over to North America nonetheless, but that's a discussion for another day. Not until the end of August are we really going to know, probably. Maybe a bit sooner, but probably not. But just a little clarifying point for those of you who know, and it's not Kent Hughes who discusses it. It actually has to be Demidov himself. Final point. Let's get into this, Jesse. This is the best thing we've seen in a while. Now, there was an article written for Montreal Hockey Now by Marco D'Amico, and I will link it down below. And before you watch this, actually, I'd recommend you go take a little read through it. It'll be easier to follow. And again, give the author the credit they deserve. They wrote a fantastic article, and it really clarifies a lot of cap points. And we're going to summarize some of the stuff for you. So basically, Montreal this year, for the first time in a long time, can actually come in under the salary cap to start the season without putting Carey Price on LTIR. And Jesse, that has huge implications, as Puckpedia is going to tell us here. As Puckpedia says, at the deadline, there are usually about 41 days left out of a 186 season. So any player that you bring into your team, you only have to pay them, and their salary cap hit is only 41 out of 186, or like, a bit less than a quarter of their average AAV. So therefore, teams' projected cap space for the year can fit 186 over 41 of their annual cap hit. So what this all means, to simplify it down basically, is that if you have cap space of say $5 million on day 1 of the season, let's assume that's exactly a quarter. Let's say it's 41 out of 164. Roughly at the deadline, that cap space is equivalent of a $20 million contract, because say a player on a $20 million contract, 3/4 of the way through the season, only $5 million of that money is left. So a team with $5 million in cap space can fit them in. With LTIR space like Montreal has been using in the past few years with Carey Price and LTIR, that number doesn't go up. So if you have $5 million LTIR space, you can only fit a player with a $5 million AAV. Jesse, this in particular sets Montreal up so beautifully, as Marco says, for some moves to bring in assets at the deadline, to move some money around, maybe have some more space for next season. It's honestly just absolutely extremely exciting.
It really is. And what Kent Hughes is doing here, really thinking ahead, this is really kind of governing a lot of his decisions, is looking forward here. And the way that this lines up, where the team's kind of healing from some of its financial wounds in the past, but now getting such a great young product on the ice, but really kind of having things with the books, right? Like even after signing Xhekaj and Barron, we're still going to have about $6 million on the cap. Mm-hmm. It's crazy how much that actually can accrue by the end of the season. It can come up to about $30 million in cap space there. But the way that this actually lines up, again, it's just so huge for this team, because it's next summer that we have this huge crop of UFAs that's going to be available. We have so many contracts that are then leaving this team, to kind of bring in that new wave. So not only are we going to have this fresh injection of all these young players, all these ELCs, which is helping this team, financially in so many ways, but then also with the money to be able to really do some big game hunting in free agency. This is something we haven't seen in a long time, right? It's been about like 6 years where we've kind of been dealing with these type of issues. So this was the one thing that was kind of, hampering the Montreal Canadiens of kind of taking some of those steps further. You kind of need to be in a good place financially to start really competing and being there with the big boys in the league. Well, that time is starting to come now. And that's, again, Kent Hughes just showing so good with contract management, asset management. This is where this really comes in. You know, he's cooking. He's got his plan for next summer, right? Like playing that long-term game again. But the way that lines up where we're going to have more spots available, right? With many those young guys then coming up, that new wave, for me just seems like perfect timing of exactly when we want to be more competitive.
Yeah, for sure, right? And like you said, you still got Barron and Xhekaj for this offseason. You're going to need Guhle next season, I believe Harris as well. But you got a lot of UFAs coming off the books with the likes of Dvorak, with the likes of Armia. Jake Evans is going to be coming off the books, probably re-signed him. You need to get Primeau a new contract. So there's going to be some maneuvering around. But the thing is, once it comes time to the deadline, if the Habs say start the season with $5 million worth of cap, and they're still, below the cap at the start of the season, like you said, Jesse, let's say even 5 million, right? We're being conservative. That still gives them well over, in terms of player contracts, over $20 million of player contracts. So, you could take on a guy with a $12 million AAV and you'd still be under the cap because there's only, $3 million left to be paid that season. And you can bring in guys with multi-year deals, right? That's another thing. You could bring in an asset that maybe has a 2-year deal that you can fit under your cap now, you can maybe move out in the summer. There's a lot of potential flexibility, and I think that's the biggest thing, the flexibility, because that's one thing the Habs are going to need. You can choose to bring in some guys. You can maybe ship some more guys out. You can afford to take on a bad expiring deal. Then you can move some picks. You can go into the offseason big game hunting, sign your extensions. There's so much left to do, guys. We are so excited. I hope you guys are too. Let us know down below your thoughts of how the Habs should use this, finally, this ability to be under the cap to start the season and the flexibility that can allow at the deadline. I think it's going to be really exciting. But that'll do it for this episode of Habs Digest. If you enjoyed, leave a like, comment, subscribe to the channel. Thank you all for watching every single day. I'm Josh Gosse alongside my co-host Jesse Poirier. We'll catch you in the next one.